here's Brody Brazil.
Well, it's time to talk gondolas and Major League Baseball stadiums. And anytime those two things are put together here in Northern California, it almost instantly starts an interesting conversation, dare I say, controversy. Because a gondola was part of the Oakland A's original plans for the Howard Terminal ballpark site. The A's thought it would be a lucrative and interesting way to get people off the streets, like as pedestrians, also to take cars off the road, and to ultimately cut down on parking spaces required at the Howard Terminal site. More on that in just a second in NorCal, but first, it actually looks like Southern California might become the first gondola-serviced professional sports venue across America. I don't know of any other. Football, baseball, basketball, hockey, any other major sporting venue. I don't know of one that has a gondola bring a large amount of people to the site. The Dodgers and Dodger Stadium, for a couple years now, they've actually been pushing for this for a couple unique reasons, but unfortunately, when you look at the drawbacks, they're all the obvious things that you would expect and that kind of apply to all of the different sites. And on that note, more on Dodger Stadium in just a bit. But first, let's go back to Howard Terminal. And as much as that project is very much up in the air right now with everything happening in Las Vegas, the gondola aspect of Howard Terminal was always a huge question mark. Even people who love the idea of Howard Terminal would say, wait, a gondola? How does that work? Is it worth the cost? Does that even make sense? What would it do the rest of the days of the year? Now, I got to tell you, I was never against the idea of a gondola. It's only about a half mile long, and it could always service bringing people from downtown Oakland to the waterfront, right next to Jack London Square. And you would have to think that in any Howard Terminal development over the years, you're always going to want people coming to the site even if there's not a baseball game on that day. So it does seem like an asset, potentially, for the city of Oakland, like even with or without a ballpark. You get some great views from up there. It transits people. Again, it keeps pedestrian off the streets and having to cross streets. There's a lot of cool upsides if you know what you're going to get out of this. Like if you set your expectations reasonably, then yeah, it's a pretty cool asset to have. Doesn't necessarily solve all of your problems. And in that, on that note, let's talk about Dodger Stadium. It's been around for decades. It's not going anywhere. It's going to exist now for several more decades because they just pumped tens and I think hundreds of millions of dollars of upgrades into it. But it seats 56,000. And look at that parking lot, or shall I say lots. I mean, it is surrounded by parking stalls, 16,000 to be exact, which obviously, as you do the math, and knowing that Dodger Stadium is literally on top of a hill, that's not enough parking spaces for 56,000 fans. You're not going to get 5 and 6 to a car, let alone maybe even 2 or 3 to a car, to have 16,000 parking spaces ever fully satisfy the 56,000 seats that are there. In fact, the whole supply and demand aspect works out that parking is $50 on game days at Dodger Stadium. And tell me if I'm right or wrong about that in the comments. That's what I found. I also saw a little bit higher. I saw it was lower on some days. But if $50 is the cost of parking, it lets you know that spaces are limited and that there is a very high demand and not so much of a supply. So what do you do about this, right? It's always been a problem. Traffic is terrible, let alone the ability to park your car or not. So here's what they want to do. They want to build a gondola that has one side end at Dodger Stadium, but the other side starts down at Union Station, a little bit closer to downtown Los Angeles. Obviously, Union Station is fully capable of handling a lot of people in and out on a regular basis with rail services. But that blue line right there, hypothetically, reflects where the gondola cables and line would go. Now, I also understand that there is a Chinatown stop as part of this gondola run. I don't exactly know how and where that fits in here, but just to get this understanding that one end would be at Union Station, close to downtown, and it would kind of take you across Chavez Ravine and up that hill to where Dodger Stadium is, and the other end, the other station or stop, would be at the parking lot. So it would take people in kind of this one line route, pretty simple to understand, up and down the hill. So now that you've kind of seen that perspective, Here are some obvious selling points. Number one, to a certain degree, any people you take off the road and cars you take off the road would ease traffic, but to a certain degree. Obviously, a gondola is a very green option. Runs on electricity, doesn't require gas, doesn't require people sitting in traffic, burning fuel. Again, all of this in a certain perspective. This doesn't fix everything, but in small ways, it's better than alternatives. The Dodgers also say that a gondola would be a free ride for any fans with tickets to the game that night. So this is not an additional cost. And if you're a fan and you live close to downtown, I got to be honest, so long as the gondola doesn't come with any delays, there's not a lot of long lines, which they'd have to really work that part out. If you could save $50 on parking every single game and you're a season ticket holder, that is a great way to get to the ballpark. Not to mention the dramatic views. Like, first off, have you ever been to Dodger Stadium? Have you ever looked from like behind home plate down the hill at downtown Los Angeles? You have a beautiful view of the skyline, and that would be replicated every single time that gondola goes up and down the hill. So dramatic views, which come with a free ride. I don't think anybody's going to be complaining about that. I know some in Chinatown, as I read, were both equally excited about the opportunity of having an additional gondola stop there because it brings people in for business. It has them come to Chinatown maybe to get on the gondola there, but some were a little bit reserved in a sense that it's all of a sudden just a lot more extra people. And maybe they don't want that. Maybe they don't want that extra traffic every single time there's a Dodger game. And the other selling point is just that Union Station, again, is already more equipped to handle a bunch of people getting there and then getting on the gondola there to take them up the hill to Dodger Stadium. So you're not having to have one stop be in a residential neighborhood. You're already doing it in a spot where people are coming on a regular basis. This is David Granis, who is represents Zero Emissions Transit. Here's his quote about it. Quote, "We can move 10,000 people per hour. In the 2 hours before a game, we can carry about a quarter of attendance at a Dodger game on this system." Now, this is the part, again, where you have to really understand expectations. 10,000 people per hour seems like a maximum amount. That seems like ultimate efficiency. In real life and practical application, I don't know if you're actually reaching that. He says they can, but I would have some questions about that. 10,000 people an hour, though, in the 2 hours before a game. Let's think about a 7:05 first pitch. Who really is getting to the gondola station at 4:30 to get on it by 5 so that they can be there by 5:20? The problem is you have such a last minute push and rush, and the gondola only operates at one speed. And it's a constant flow of people, but the 2 hour part, like, again, do you ever go to professional sports games 2 hours ahead of time? Maybe, if you specifically want to check out batting practice or warm-ups or whatever. But I would say most people, and I've seen this firsthand, most people are not even there an hour, let alone 40 minutes before a game starts. So to fully utilize the capacity of this, you need time. I'm not so sure fans are willing to be that early to make this that efficient. The drawbacks, right? And like I said before, these drawbacks apply to pretty much any gondola system that you could think of that would go to a professional sports venue. Efficiency, it lacks. And it would be one thing if you told me that Dodger Stadium seated 35,000, and if you could even get 10,000 in 1 hour before a game. Okay, now you're talking about a third of the fans, hypothetically, in 60 minutes before the game. Okay, but to try and get even a fraction of 56,000, it's very difficult to do in this case. How about privacy on the ground? Now think about this for a second. You know, that blue line you saw earlier, I'm pretty sure it crosses over somebody's house, somebody's backyard. Could they see in your windows? You know, all of a sudden you have people peering down on you from the gondola. And if you live below that line where it's planned to be, I mean, nobody ever really thinks about this. You know, in the case of downtown Oakland, let me go back to that one. It's not entirely all residential in that case. And I also don't know, be a shorter route. In the Los Angeles design, I'm not sure what it crosses over, but you'd have to think somewhere along the way, somebody's going to take exception to people just constantly moving overhead. Even if it's nice and quiet, they're still able to kind of peek down into your property, your house, your location, your whatever. The effects of parking. Now, what does this do for parking? Does this make parking more available? Do parking prices go up even more because of this? There's also an accusation that the McCourt family, who used to own the Dodgers, but now still only owns the parking lots surrounding Dodger Stadium, they want to actually develop those parking lots. So they actually, of those 16,000 spaces, they want to cut down on that. This is a way to cut down on parking spaces, is to ship people in via gondola so that they can utilize, the parking area for more real estate options, residential, commercial, I don't know. So what effects does this actually have on an already, cramped parking structure at Dodger Stadium? And then last, but obviously not least, $300 to $500 million is the cost of this. And nobody has said yet that it would be entirely privately financed. There seems to be the expectation that there could be some public cost for this Dodger Stadium gondola, which I think if you're the public, again, it's a non-starter in California, but especially for the specialty nature of this, I don't see how public funding goes into this at all. So it's weird. In a lot of ways, I like the idea of this. I like so many things about this. But I also look at it more of a luxury than a reality. And that's probably, unfortunately, why things like this are going to be hard to ever happen. And the Dodgers are pushing hard for it. Even the A's during Howard Terminal, they kind of let it go. The gondola was on the environmental impact report, but it also had the asterisk to say, this is not a for sure thing. This is kind of an option. We're not even positive that the A's would even go this route. So we'll see. Will a gondola go to a Major League Baseball stadium, specifically Dodger Stadium in Southern California? Thumbs up on this video. Since you made it here to the very end, I appreciate that. Put your comments down below. What do you think about this idea? And don't forget, subscribe to this channel so that I can definitely see you back here next time.